Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi and welcome to Midweek Magic, where I want you to grow your collection by winning 2 free rare or better ICRs each and every week. This week's Midweek Magic brings us a hybrid concept that I don't believe we've ever seen for midweek or anything else for that matter, combining the Artisan idea of just using commons and uncommons with the wildly popular Brawl, don't call it, Commander format. Of course, this is going to be a new thing, but we have something pretty special for you, and I think it's going to work out just great. Talk about accessibility here, Singleton and Artisan. But before we get into all that, this whole midweek magic thing has become a bit of a tradition here at the Stronghold, and it all started with our crack team of researchers discovering that we were the only YouTube channel making consistent, proactive, and timely midweek magic coverage. And here we are years later, and it appears that we're still the only ones out there doing it for the budget community. So be sure to subscribe to the Planeswalker Stronghold so that we can be here for you every chance we get. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Believe it or not, I've been around Arena for so long that I remember when it was nothing but standard. And in fact, when rotation happened, they had no choice but to delete the cards because they were kind of useless since you could only play standard. But of course, since then, the Eternal formats available on Arena have grown by leaps and bounds. In fact, it kind of seems like we have a new one every time we turn around now. But in order for me to recommend an Eternal deck as being budget friendly, it's got to meet one basic criteria. At least half of the non-land cards in the deck need to come from those recent and easily accessible sets like Standard, Alchemy that is in rotation, or Eternal direct releases that have been done during that budget year, i.e. since the most recent rotation. And once we have that easy, accessible basis, I will try and assist you in making small, strategic, and versatile investments in your Eternal collection so that your wild card pool continues to grow while your Eternal options do as well. Now, of course, in order to comply with this week's Artisan criteria, we are going to have to pick a commander that is an uncommon, mostly because there are no common commanders currently on Arena to my knowledge. I have not been shy this season about talking about how good I think the Is It artifacts are from the recent Murders of Karlov Manor expansion, and how well that interacts with the Artifact/Pirates Matter from last season's LCI expansion. And of course, at the very forefront of this is the legendary human pirate Captain Storm Cosmium Raider. For just Is It, that's blue and a red, you get a 2/2 creature, and whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control. That, of course, can be Captain Storm herself. So let's take a look and see exactly how we want to build around this for this event. This actually has been such a popular concept. I just released a video within the last couple days of this video's release talking about this as a budget standard deck. Be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Alright, so let's start the meat of this deck tech by talking about the many colorless cards that are in this deck. The first column there, just to the far left or right of Captain Storm, depending upon how you think about it. These are all cards that I think are really essential for any Brawl deck. If you don't have these, I think they're well worth crafting. Definitely something to think about. We've got Mishra's Bauble and Wayfarer's Bauble. Mishra's Bauble gives you a bit of free card advantage. Wayfarer's Bauble lets you basically tutor up a land. I think everybody's familiar with Arcane Signet, and well, everybody has that card at this point. Cold Steel Heart is a 2-mana rock, very nice. Guardian Idol, another 2-mana rock that can also give you a creature when you need it. Although, watch how you tap your mana, because the auto tapper gets a little weird with that. And well, there's Cold Steel Heart if you're not familiar. Enters tapped, and when it does, you choose a color, and then it taps for a mana of that color moving forward. Mind Stone is another 2-mana rock that also can be sacrificed to draw a card late in the game, because at some point you have all the mana that you really need. And of course, Ornithopter of Paradise is another 2-mana rock that also happens to be a flying creature and an artifact here, so you'll see some tricks later on to actually make this a potential offensive or defensive threat. Moving into column 2 here, these are not all artifacts. One of them is just a colorless creature, but all of these have the Changeling trait, which means they are every creature type. I have recommended a 1-of set on these before, but Universal Automation as a 1-drop, a 1/1 Changeling. Bloodline Pretender as a 3-mana 2/2. When it ETBs, you choose a creature type. Whenever another creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on the Pretender. So in this deck, obviously, you're probably going to want to choose Pirate. Faceless Agent is the non-artifact here, but still just as good for a common, a 3-mana 2/2 with Changeling. So it in fact is every creature type right off the bat. And when it ETBs, you get to seek a creature card of the type most prevalent in your deck. Again, for this, unless you had a very weird draw situation, that is going to seek you up a Pirate. Moving into column 3 here, these are artifacts that are some of my favorites, pretty much all from standard right now, and they make the backbone of any artifact-based deck that I make. Ginger Brute at common, Iron Apprentice at common as well, High Speed Hoverbike as an uncommon. I think everybody's familiar with Patchwork Automation at uncommon. And a little less well known, Atraxas Skitterfang is just an absolute Swiss Army knife of solving board state problems for you. 3-mana 2/2 uncommon. When you move to your combat, you can take a counter off of this and choose to give a creature you control flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink. Pretty solid utility there. The last column of the colorless cards here are things that I think work very well in this specific deck, but obviously don't have the universal appeal of some of the other things that we've talked about. Prying Blade is a nice little addition in the red zone, giving +1/+0, but more importantly, when it connects with your opponent, it creates a treasure token, something which is going to be very useful in this deck. Ichor Wellspring is a 2-mana artifact. When it ETBs or is put into your graveyard, you draw a card, and this deck has lots of ways to help you sack that back off the board, not only for whatever advantage you were sacking it to, but also to draw that additional card. Limbus is from the Lord of the Rings set, and a lot of people aren't going to be familiar with this, but a 2-mana common. When it ETBs, you get to scry 1, then draw a card. Very solid for 2 mana. And then later, of course, it is a food, so you can tap 2 and sack it to gain 3 life. When it's put into the graveyard, its owner shuffles it into their library, so it gets to kind of recur. And, well, it's an homage to the old Tolkien Elven Limbus bread that just never seems to run out. From here, we've also got a standard, well, not quite staple, but it was a very solid card in the limited environment for Brothers War. 2-mana artifact with flying. Not a creature, though. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, like just a non-creature artifact, for instance, put a +1/+1 counter on the statue, pay 2 mana, it becomes a 1/1 construct artifact creature until end of turn. And of course, we have lots of ways to animate this so you're not paying 2 mana turn after turn after 2. And of course, also from Brothers of War, from the bonus sheet, is Foundry Inspector, 3 mana uncommon, 3/2. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less. So this little guy does a lot of work in this deck, to say for sure. Next up, I just want to go over the mana base and a couple cards that contribute to it. Of course, we're running a lot of basics here, islands and mountains, 15, 16 on that. We've got Molt Tributary. Of course, this is just one of those lower rarity lands that everyone has right now. Silver Bluff Bridge is the indestructible dual common that is available in Historic. I recommend this in a earlier version of the deck. Hopefully you picked it up then, and it's just lowering your cost for this event. Swiftwater Cliffs, very much like the Tributary. It's just a great little, comes into play tapped. Of course, this one is one of the gain lands, so you do get a little life out of it. I think everybody knows Command Tower at this point. Darksteel Citadel is another one of those artifact lands, also indestructible, so this makes a great target for animation, because once you do, they pretty much can't kill it. They have to target the enchantment on it directly. Scene of the Crime is both an artifact and a clue, so it ETBs as an artifact. It gets sacrificed with an onboard ability as a clue, and while it's there, it is allowing you to produce colorless mana or tap an untapped creature you control to add 1 mana of any color, so that can be useful fixing. And of course, Secluded Courtyard, everybody knows this card. I think it's been around the channel this year, or the last couple years, really. All about those creature types. When it ETBs, you name a creature type, and it will produce mana of any color in order to help you cast that creature type. Far and away, the pirates are the biggest creature type in this, but keep in mind that this card will not tap for mana of any color to help you cast a non-pirate spell. So it is both utility and fixing, and a bit of a hindrance on the flip side of the coin. The other lands in the deck here, let me see here, we've got the red Spikefield Hazard, which is an instant 1 damage to any target spell, and on the flip side is a land that ETBs tapped or can tap for a red mana. Not or, and. It does both of those. In the 2-drop column, we have a similar spell. These are both things that I recommend very much adding to your Eternal collections. You'll use them quite a lot. 2 mana Jawari Disruption, instant counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. You'd be surprised how often people tap out for things, even against possible control decks. And of course, the flip side of the card is once again an enters tapped land. This time, of course, it taps for blue. So, of course, I've talked about pirates several times within this, and this deck is chock full of them here. Some of these are not standard, so you will have to potentially craft something like Siren Storm Tamer that is both an evasive 1-drop and it gives you a counter ability by sacrificing it. Spectral Sailor gives you card draw late game. It's also a flash creature, which can be important sometimes. And another 1 mana, 1/1 evasive creature. Very, very nice. I think everybody knows Spyglass Siren, another 1 mana, 1/1 evasive creature. This one brings a map token to the party, which of course we like the artifacts in this deck. Fanatical Firebrand is just a straight up pirate goblin. 1 mana, 1/1 with haste. It also has the onboard ability that you can tap it and sacrifice it to deal 1 damage to any target, which can make those blocking combat situations a little harder to deal with. Another goblin pirate is the Tomb Raider. Don't call him Laura though, he gets really upset about that. As long as you control an artifact, the Tomb Raider gets +1/+0 and has haste. It's a 1 mana, base stats a 1/2, but of course it can become a 2/2 in the right situation. From here we've got Oaken Siren, another pirate here. 2 mana, 1/2 with flying and vigilance. That Vigilance is particularly nice because as a 1/2, she blocks pretty well and has an onboard ability to tap for a blue mana, which can only be spent to cast artifact spells or activate abilities of artifact sources. But not to worry, we have quite a few of those. Pirate Hat, of course, is the ubiquitous equipment going on for pirates, gives +1/+1, and whenever this creature attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. Can be problematic. There's going to be times where you don't want to equip this because maybe you're digging a little far into your deck. It does equip to pirates for 1 or to everybody else for 2. Staunch Crewmate is kind of a tutor, 2 mana, 2/1. When it ETBs, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an artifact or pirate card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is just a really solid card because I think something like 65% of our non-land cards and even a few of our land cards meet that requirement of being either and or an artifact or pirate. Very cool stuff. Enterprising Scalawag at uncommon, 2 mana, 2/2. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, create a treasure token. All right, moving into the 3-drop pirate-themed cards. We got a few here that you might not have in your collection because they are older. Of course, if you can avoid crafting some of these older cards, or maybe you have different things that have similar context, by all means, feel free to conserve your wild cards. Lookout's Dispersal is a 3 mana instant. Cost 1 less to cast if you control a pirate. That's not 1 mana per pirate, it's just a true or false sort of thing. Counter target spell unless the controller pays 4. So it is technically a soft counter, but it's a pretty big one, and you're going to catch a lot of folks off guard, particularly if they are trying to bring back their commander later in the game. Sailor of Means, common, I don't even remember which set this is. I think this is from one of the Arena expansion. 2 and a blue, Sailor of Means. When it ETBs, create a treasure token. It's a 1/4. So this really comes down on turn 3 and allows you to block pretty effectively so that some of your earlier creatures can be more aggressive on that turn 3. Speaking of aggressive, Brazen Blade Master, 3 mana, Orc Pirate, 2/3. When it attacks, while you control 2 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+1 until end of turn, making it a 4/4 for 3 mana. And let me tell you, there's not going to be too many situations where you're not meeting that 2 or more artifacts requirement. Another great card that you might not have, but is great for this deck, 3 mana instant, Fiery Cannonade, deals 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. This will basically give scoop from all those token decks and things like that. And of course, most people know Plundering Pirate from standard right now, 3 mana, 3/2. When it ETBs, brings along a treasure token. And again, we like the artifacts. At the 4-drop slot, we got one that you might not know, Deadeye Quartermaster, 3 mana and a blue. When it ETBs, you may search your library for an equipment or vehicle card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. We are running, I believe, 3 or 4 equipments in this deck, all of which are pretty solid and good targets. So this is one I would think pretty seriously about crafting if you like this style deck. On the other end of the spectrum, I think a card everybody has and is pretty familiar with is the Waylaying Pirates. When it ETBs, if you control an artifact, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls, and put a stun counter on it. A pretty effective deal there. And let's take just a moment and take a look at those equipment. So we talked about Prime Blade, we talked about Pirate Hat. We've also got the Diamond Pickaxe in there. And Idol of the Deep King, I don't believe you can tutor for this off of the Quartermaster, because in its base form it is just an artifact and not an equipment, but of course it shows up here for this search. And that, of course, leaves just a handful of cards that we have not already talked about. And I'm just going to call out the highlights. Most of these are either artifacts themselves or work very, very nicely with artifacts. First up, we've got the Gleeful Demolition. This combos so nicely with those indestructible lands that hopefully you are investing in. Reinforced Ronin is just a repeatable artifact. Voltage Surge is both a removal spell that can deal up to 4 damage, but also it is a sacrifice outlet for your artifacts. Somehow I missed Gingerbrute when we were talking about colorless cards, but he's up in there in a good one. Mindstone's Automation is a way to animate up an artifact and make it a threat in and of itself. It also allows you to draw 2 cards and discard a card, which can be very nice at particular points in the game. I think everybody knows the Wedding Glyph at this point. It's just an absolute beast, and if they do deal with it, it discards 3. Living Lectern is one that most people aren't quite as familiar with. It is an artifact. It has a on-board sacrifice role that allows you to create a sorcerer role token. So that can be a nice way to use them as a blocker and then sack them out, etc., etc. Lodestone Needle, I think everybody knows if you played LCI Limited. Malcator's Watcher, this is from last year. A lot of people aren't going to be too familiar with this, although I have talked about it before. It's a 2-mana 1/1 Flying Vigilance, Phyrexian Drone artifact creature. When it dies, you get to draw a card. Red Herring is a 2/2 with haste and also has an onboard sack outlet to allow you to draw a card. Pretty good stuff. The Mechanaut is it color 2/2 artifact creature Goblin Artificer. Pretty nice on that. Artifacts spells you can cast cost 1 less. So that's 2 times we have that effect in this deck. Gleaming Geardrake, I think, needs no introduction. He likes artifacts. He gives you 1 when he ETBs, and he gets bigger every time you sack 1. Third Path Iconoclast is a little out of place on this one, as it's not a spell deck where you normally see this. But of course, non-creature artifacts will trigger him as well, and he creates artifacts which Captain Storm is going to reward. So he's not without his place, and this is a card that I know everybody has in their collection, thanks to the current year starter decks. Crime Novelist is kind of an Artifacts Matter all-star from the current set. Every time you sack an artifact, it gets a +1/+1 counter and creates a red mana. This can lead to a lot of interesting loop behavior. Harry Dronesmith is another nice one. 4-mana 2/3, creates and sacrifices a 1/1 colorless Thopter token every single turn. Mishra's Onslaught is one of the few instants and sorceries in the deck. 4 mana. You get to choose 1, create 2 1/1 colorless artifact, colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, or creature tokens you control get +2/+0. So this can help build your board or help you with that alpha strike. Detective Satchel, I think, is an all-star from the current set. Everybody knows this. And Benthic Criminologist, a 5-mana 4/5. When it ETBs or attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, draw a card. And all of these first 2 columns here are all from standard right now. The only remaining card, of course, is in Soul Artifacts, a 2-mana enchant artifact aura. The enchanted artifact is a creature with base power and toughness 5/5, in addition to its other types. So depending upon where you put this, it can certainly be much bigger than 5/5, or become very evasive with something like Gingerbrute. Pretty neat stuff there. And hey, just in case you didn't catch all that, Matt would like you to know that the deck list that we discussed in this video is going to have a link down in the doobly-doo to take you over to Aetherhub, along with a link to any other alternative lists that you might wish to consider. He only asks that you give it a little thumbs up when you're over there checking out the deck list. And I plan on live playing this event on Wednesday at 11 a.m. over on my Twitch channel, so definitely stop in and check it out. Because the Stronghold is so much more than just a YouTube channel, and you can find links to all of our other social media outlets in our profile. Because at the end of the day, we're all budget players. And as a community, we're stronger together. So like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all those things to show a little love. It's appreciated more than you know.